I, 32F, lost my dad to lung cancer last November, and I'm still struggling to cope with his absence. My dad, Jonathan, was my rock, always there with advice, support, and his terrible dad jokes. We were incredibly close, especially after my mom left when I was 12. His death came so suddenly. He was diagnosed in August and gone by November. The speed of it all left me reeling. To understand why Dad's death hit me so hard, you need to know a bit about our family history. My parents, Jonathan and Marie, met in college. They were the classic opposites attract couple. Dad was steady and practical, Mom was artistic and free-spirited. They balanced each other out, or so I thought. I was born when they were in their early 30s, and my sister Rebecca came along 6 years later. We had a pretty typical suburban childhood: summer barbecues, family game nights, annual camping trips. Dad worked as an accountant, and Mom was a part-time art teacher. Everything seemed perfect on the surface. But when I was 12 and Rebecca was 18, Mom dropped a bombshell. She'd been offered a position with an art collective in New Mexico, and she was taking it, without us. I remember the night she told us. We were sitting at the dinner table, and she just blurted it out between bites of lasagna. Dad went pale, Rebecca started yelling, and I just sat there, unable to process what was happening. Mom left a week later. She said she needed to find herself, and that she felt suffocated in our small town. She promised to call and visit, but those promises grew hollow over time. The calls became less frequent, the visits never materialized. By the time I was in high school, we were lucky to get a birthday card. Dad stepped up in a big way after Mom left. He learned to cook, with varying degrees of success, helped me with my homework, and tried his best to fill the gap Mom left behind. He started taking us on little adventures on the weekends, hiking trips, visits to museums, even an ill-fated attempt at skiing that left us all bruised but laughing. Rebecca dealt with Mom's departure differently. She threw herself into her studies and extracurriculars, spending less and less time at home. As soon as she graduated high school, she was off to college on the other side of the country. I understood her need to get away, but it felt like another abandonment. I, on the other hand, clung to Dad even more. I chose a local college so I could live at home, and even after graduating, I only moved a few blocks away. Dad and I had standing dinner dates every Sunday, and we talked on the phone almost daily. He was my parent, my friend, and my support system all rolled into one. That's why his cancer diagnosis hit me like a freight train. It was during one of our Sunday dinners. I noticed he seemed tired and was picking at his food. When I asked if he was okay, he told me about the doctor's appointment he'd had earlier that week. Stage 4 lung cancer. Inoperable. The next 3 months were a blur of hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and late-night conversations. Dad tried to stay positive, cracking jokes even when he was hooked up to IVs. But I could see the fear in his eyes, the same fear I felt every time I looked at him. He deteriorated quickly. By October, he was in hospice care. I took a leave of absence from work to be with him as much as possible. Rebecca flew in from California, but she always seemed uncomfortable in the hospice room, making excuses to step out or run errands. Dad passed away on a quiet Tuesday morning in November. I was holding his hand when he took his last breath. Rebecca was in the cafeteria, getting coffee. In his will, Dad left the house to Rebecca. I think he worried about her feeling disconnected from the family and thought this might give her a reason to visit more often. To my surprise, Rebecca decided to move back and live in the house. She invited me to stay with her while I figured out my next steps. At first, it seemed like a good arrangement. We hadn't lived together since we were teenagers, and I thought it might be a chance for us to reconnect. But our different ways of grieving soon caused friction. Which brings me to last week, Dad's birthday. He would have been 65. I took the day off work, planning to visit his grave and then have a quiet evening at home, maybe looking through old photo albums. When I got back from the cemetery, I found Rebecca hosting a dinner party. She had invited her friends over, and they were laughing and drinking in the living room where Dad's urn sits on the mantel. I was shocked. I stood in the doorway, unable to process what I was seeing. Rebecca spotted me and waved me over, saying, "Hey sis, come join us. We're celebrating Dad's life." I couldn't believe she was treating Dad's birthday like a festive occasion. It felt so wrong and disrespectful. I turned and went straight to my room, locking the door behind me. I could hear the party continue downstairs, people laughing and music playing. It was like a knife twisting in my chest. How could Rebecca do this? How could she act like everything was normal and fine when our dad was gone? After an hour, Rebecca knocked on my door. I didn't answer. She tried to talk to me through the door, saying she thought it would be nice to remember Dad in a positive way. I texted her that I couldn't believe she'd do this on his birthday, of all days. She replied that Dad wouldn't want us to be sad and that I needed to start moving on. I'm furious and heartbroken. Rebecca knows how much I'm struggling with Dad's death. This feels like a complete betrayal of his memory in my grief. Am I overreacting? Should I just accept that Rebecca grieves differently? Or do I have a right to be upset about this? Some additional background: Rebecca and I have always had different relationships with our parents. When Mom left, I was devastated and clung to Dad even more. Rebecca, being older, seemed to take it in stride and became very independent. She moved out at 18 for college and only came home for holidays after that. I stayed local for school and remained close to Dad. Rebecca also butted heads with Dad more as an adult. She didn't approve of some of his life choices, like continuing to smoke even after Mom left. They had some big arguments about it over the years. I always defended Dad, which caused some tension between Rebecca and me. I remember one particularly bad fight during Rebecca's senior year of college. She came home for Thanksgiving and caught Dad smoking in the backyard. She exploded, calling him selfish and irresponsible. Dad tried to calm her down, but she stormed off and spent the rest of the holiday with friends. I was left trying to salvage our Thanksgiving dinner, watching Dad push his food around his plate, his eyes sad and distant. Despite these conflicts, I know Rebecca loved Dad in her own way. She'd always made sure to call on his birthday and Father's Day, and she helped him set up his first smartphone so they could video chat. But sometimes I feel like she doesn't understand how much he meant to me. He was my constant, my safe place in a world that had already seen too much upheaval. Losing him has left this enormous hole in my life that I don't know how to fill. Every morning, I still reach for my phone to text him good morning. Every Sunday, I feel lost, not knowing what to do with the time I used to spend at our dinner dates. I've tried to maintain some of our traditions, watching old westerns on Saturday afternoons, attempting his famous chili recipe, but it just makes his absence more pronounced. I'm planning to move out soon. I've been looking at apartments, but the housing market here is tough. Now I feel like I need to speed up that process. I can't imagine staying here if Rebecca is going to be so callous about Dad's memory. Am I being unreasonable? Should I try to talk to Rebecca about this, or just focus on moving out as soon as possible? I feel so lost and alone without Dad, and now I feel like I'm losing my sister too. Any advice would be appreciated. Update 1: It's been about a month since my last post, and a lot has happened. First, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments and advice. It really helped me gain some perspective on the situation with Rebecca. A week after the birthday incident, I finally worked up the courage to talk to Rebecca face to face. I explained how hurt I was by her actions and how it felt like she was disrespecting Dad's memory. To my surprise, Rebecca broke down in tears. She admitted that the party wasn't just about celebrating Dad's life, it was her way of distracting herself from her own grief. It turns out Rebecca has been struggling more than she let on. She confessed that she feels guilty about all the arguments she had with Dad over the years, especially about his smoking. She regrets not spending more time with him in his final months. The party was her misguided attempt to push away the pain and guilt she's been feeling. As we talked, Rebecca shared a memory that shed light on her complicated relationship with Dad. During her sophomore year of college, she'd been going through a rough patch, struggling with classes, a bad breakup, and feeling lost about her future. She'd called Dad in tears one night, and he'd driven 6 hours straight to surprise her on campus the next day. He spent the weekend with her, helping her study, making her laugh, and reminding her of her strengths. Rebecca said she'd never told me about this because she felt embarrassed about her breakdown, but it was a turning point in her relationship with Dad. This revelation changed things between us. We spent hours talking that night, sharing memories of Dad and discussing our different ways of coping. It didn't magically fix everything, but it was a start. We agreed to try and be more open with each other about our feelings and to respect each other's grieving process. However, just as Rebecca and I were beginning to understand each other better, another issue arose. Last week, I was cleaning out Dad's old office. Rebecca had asked me to help sort through his things, and I found some documents that left me reeling. Hidden in the back of Dad's filing cabinet was a folder containing letters and photos. As I looked through them, I realized they were from a woman named Linda. The letters spoke of a years-long relationship, with mentions of secret meetups and plans for the future. The most recent letter was dated just 2 months before Dad's diagnosis. I was stunned. Dad had been in a relationship for years, and he never told us. I showed the letters to Rebecca, and she was just as shocked as I was. We knew Dad had dated casually over the years, but nothing serious, or so we thought. As we pored over the letters and photos, we started to piece together a timeline. The earliest letter was dated about 5 years ago, not long after I had graduated college. There were photos of Dad and Linda at various locations, a beach I didn't recognize, a cozy-looking cabin, even one of them dressed up for what looked like a wedding. One letter in particular caught our attention. Linda wrote about a weekend they had spent together at a bed and breakfast in a nearby town. The date coincided with a weekend Dad had told us he was going on a fishing trip with some work buddies. I remember feeling hurt at the time that he hadn't invited me along, as we often went fishing together. Now, the truth of that weekend felt like a betrayal. The most recent letter was the hardest to read. In it, Linda talked about their plans for the future, retiring together, traveling the world. She mentioned looking at houses in Florida. It was clear that their relationship was serious, and that they had been making long-term plans together. Now, we're both grappling with this new information. It feels like a betrayal, like we didn't really know Dad as well as we thought we did. Why didn't he tell us about Linda? Was he planning to leave us for her? Did she know about his illness? I'm angry and hurt all over again. Just when I thought I was starting to come to terms with Dad's death, this revelation has reopened all those wounds. I keep thinking back to all the times Dad said he was working late or going on trips with friends. How many of those times was he actually with Linda? Rebecca is upset too, but she's dealing with it differently. She wants to track Linda down and get answers. She's been scouring social media and online directories, trying to find any trace of this woman who was such a big part of Dad's life. I'm not sure if tracking down Linda is a good idea. Part of me wants answers too, but another part is scared of what we might learn. What if Linda tells us things about Dad that change how we see him even more? What if she knew things about us that Dad shared with her? The thought makes me uncomfortable. This discovery has also brought up complicated feelings about Mom. I find myself wondering if Dad's relationship with Linda was some kind of karmic payback for Mom leaving us. Did he feel like he had to hide his relationship because of how Mom's departure affected me? Or was he just being selfish, wanting to keep his new life separate from his role as our father? I don't know how to process this. It feels like I'm losing Dad all over again, but this time I'm losing the image I had of him too. The Dad I thought I knew, the one who was always honest with me, who I could trust completely, feels like a stranger now. Rebecca and I are trying to support each other through this, but it's hard. We're both dealing with our own complex emotions, and sometimes it feels like we're speaking different languages when we try to talk about it. How do we move forward from here? Should we try to find Linda? Or is it better to let sleeping dogs lie? And how do we reconcile this new information with the memory of our dad? Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Update 2. It's been 2 months since my last update, and things have taken an unexpected turn. Despite my reservations, Rebecca decided to track down Linda. She found her on social media and reached out. To our surprise, Linda agreed to meet with us. We met Linda, 59F, at a small cafe last weekend. She was nothing like I had imagined. I had pictured someone younger, maybe flashy or intimidating. Instead, Linda was a soft-spoken woman with kind eyes and graying hair. She seemed genuinely emotional about Dad, her hands shaking slightly as she stirred her coffee. As we talked, we learned that their relationship was much more complicated than we had assumed. Linda and Dad had known each other since high school. They dated briefly back then but lost touch when they went to different colleges. They reconnected at their 30-year high school reunion, shortly after Mom left us. Linda shared some stories from their high school days. Apparently, Dad had been quite the prankster back then. She told us about a time when he had managed to fill the principal's car with packing peanuts as a senior prank. It was strange hearing about this mischievous side of Dad, so different from the serious, responsible father we knew. Their reunion came at a difficult time for both of them. Linda had recently divorced her husband of 25 years after discovering his infidelity. Dad, of course, was dealing with the aftermath of Mom's departure. They started as friends, supporting each other through their respective life changes, but over time, it developed into something more. The reason Dad never told us about Linda was because of me. Apparently, he was worried about how I would react to him dating seriously. He knew how hard Mom's departure had hit me and didn't want me to feel like he was trying to replace her. Linda understood and agreed to keep their relationship private until I was ready. This revelation hit me hard. I felt guilty for being the reason Dad felt he couldn't be open about his relationship, and angry that he had assumed I couldn't handle it. I remembered all the times I had complained to Dad about feeling lonely or wishing he would start dating again. Had he been silently carrying the weight of his secret relationship all that time? Rebecca, on the other hand, was furious that Dad had kept this from both of us for so long. She pointed out that I was an adult, fully capable of dealing with Dad dating. She felt that Dad had underestimated both of us and robbed us of the chance to know an important part of his life. Linda also shared that she knew about Dad's illness. She was there for him throughout his treatment, visiting him in the hospital when we weren't around. She showed us pictures on her phone. Dad looked happy in them, despite his condition. There was one photo that particularly struck me: Dad in his hospital bed, Linda sitting beside him, both of them laughing at something off camera. It was strange seeing the side of Dad's life that we knew nothing about. We learned that Dad had planned to tell us about Linda after his first round of treatment. He had hoped that once he started getting better, he could introduce Linda to us properly. But as his condition worsened, he became more hesitant, not wanting to add any stress to an already difficult situation. Linda told us about their last conversation, just days before Dad passed away. He had made her promise to reach out to us after some time had passed. He wanted us to know about her, about the happiness she had brought to his life. Linda had been respecting his wishes by giving us time to grieve before making contact. The meeting with Linda left us with mixed emotions. On one hand, it was comforting to know that Dad had someone who cared for him so deeply in his final years. Linda's story showed us a side of Dad we hadn't known, a man capable of romance and spontaneity, who had found love again after heartbreak. On the other hand, it highlighted how much of Dad's life we didn't know about. It was difficult to reconcile the image of our dad, the steady, somewhat predictable man we knew, with this person who had been living a sort of double life. Rebecca and I are still processing all of this. We've had some heated discussions about whether Dad was right to keep this from us. Rebecca feels betrayed, arguing that we had a right to know about such an important part of Dad's life. She's angry that we missed out on years of knowing Linda and seeing Dad happy in his relationship. I'm torn between understanding Dad's motives and feeling hurt by the deception. Part of me can see why Dad might have hesitated to tell us, especially given how I struggled with Mom's departure. But another part feels like he didn't trust us enough to handle the truth. We're also unsure about how to proceed with Linda. She expressed a desire to stay in touch, saying she feels connected to us through Dad. She offered to share more stories and photos from their time together. Part of me wants to embrace this connection to Dad's life, to learn more about the man he was when he wasn't being our father. But another part feels like it's too much to handle right now. Rebecca seems more open to maintaining a relationship with Linda. She's already made plans to meet Linda for coffee next week. I'm more hesitant, still trying to reconcile my feelings about this whole situation. How do we move forward from here? Should we maintain a relationship with Linda? And how do we reconcile this new information with the memory of our dad? Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and a lot has changed. After much soul-searching and many discussions with Rebecca, we decided to cautiously maintain a relationship with Linda. It hasn't been easy, but it's been enlightening in many ways. Through our conversations with Linda, we've learned so much more about Dad, stories from his youth, his dreams, and even his regrets. It's like we're getting to know a whole new side of him. Linda has shared photos and mementos from their time together, which have been both painful and precious to see. One particularly emotional moment came when Linda gave us letters Dad had written to her during his illness. In them, he expressed his love for Rebecca and me, his regrets about not being more open with us, and his hopes for our futures. Reading these letters was incredibly difficult, but also healing in a way. It felt like getting one last message from Dad. Linda told us about a conversation she had with Dad near the end. He had expressed regret about not telling us about their relationship sooner. He worried that he had made a mistake in trying to protect us, and that by keeping Linda a secret, he had inadvertently created a divide between his dad life and his personal life. Rebecca and I have grown closer through this experience. We've had to lean on each other as we navigate this complex situation. We've had our arguments and disagreements, but we're learning to understand and respect each other's perspectives and ways of grieving. I've finally moved out of Rebecca's house and into my own apartment. It was a big step, but it felt necessary for my healing process. Rebecca and I still see each other regularly, often meeting up with Linda for coffee or dinner. Linda has become an unexpected source of comfort for both of us. She doesn't try to replace Dad or our mom, but she offers a unique perspective on Dad's life that we never had before. It's strange, but in a way, maintaining this connection with her helps us feel connected to Dad. We've also started a small tradition of our own. On the anniversary of Dad's passing last month, instead of a party or a somber remembrance, we had a quiet dinner, just Rebecca, Linda, and me. We shared stories about Dad, laughed at his terrible jokes, and yes, shed some tears too. It felt right, a balance between honoring his memory and celebrating his life. I won't say that everything is perfect now. We still have our difficult days. Sometimes seeing Linda brings up complicated emotions. There are moments when I feel a pang of jealousy, thinking about the time Linda had with Dad that we missed out on. But overall, I feel like we're in a better place. Dad's death and the revelations that followed have changed us all. But through it all, I've learned that love, even with its complications and imperfections, is what endures. And in that, I find some peace.